Hey, Wheaton North, Mr. Yergler here. We're going to talk about solution stoichiometry, or you might think of these as like multi-step molarity problems. We've done molarity, and so now the next step is to kind of apply that use of molarity and concentration into problems, stoic problems that deal with concentration. All right. This picture here I have is of what's called volumetric glassware. We haven't used this at all yet, so I want to kind of go over it real quick. Volumetric pipette and volumetric flask. They're called volumetric because they are specific for a specific volume. They give you a lot of significant figures. They're very precise, but only for one specific volume. So on a 10 mil pipette, you'll have like a little mark here, and that measures exactly 10 milliliters of liquid there, or of solution. Same thing here. On a volumetric flask, you'll have a very small ring or calibration mark right here. And when the water level, when the bottom of the meniscus is right at that mark, then you have exactly 100 milliliters. It's not very good for measuring any other volume, but it's awesome for measuring a very specific volume. So a lot of times we use that when we want to be really precise with the solutions that we're making. All right, so we've already covered molarity, and now we're going to apply the molarity into other types of problems and do kind of more complex dilution and molarity problems. Let's say that you're running a lab in college or something. You're the lab assistant or the TA for your professor, and you need 100 milliliter solution of 3 molar HCl, hydrochloric acid, per pair of students, and there's 26 students. All right. The stockroom has tons of 12 molar HCl and 1 molar HCl. Which acid would make the most sense to use, or which acid do you have to use for this lab? Obviously, you have to use the more concentrated one. We can't make the 1 molar more concentrated than it already is. So we have to dilute down the 12 molar down to the concentration that we need. Now, if we have 26 students, and remember that they're split up into pairs and 100 mils per pair, they each need 3 molar solution of acid. Calculate how much of that original stock solution, the 12 molar stuff, are we going to need in order to dilute down to the right volume and concentration. Go ahead and do that. Pause the video and do that in your notes. All right, I'm going to do this on paper. And I'm going to actually use dimensional analysis because it's just that awesome. We have 26 students, right? And we have 2 students per pair. Each pair needs 100 milliliters of solution, right? And so this will tell us the total volume. Our students cancels, our pairs cancel. Tells us the total volume we would need, which is 1,300 milliliters, or just 1.3 liters. Now, let's go to the dilution portion of this. We know we have 12 molar solution. We don't know how much of it we need to make our 3 molar solution, but we do know that we need 1.3 liters of it. Okay, so from here it's just straight algebra. X ends up equaling 0.325 liters of solution. So you would want to take 325 milliliters and then dilute that to a volume of 1.3 liters, and your final solution would then be 3 molar. Here's another look at the volumetric glassware. Whenever you're doing a dilution, if you need to do it what's called volumetrically or very precisely, then you want to figure out how much of the stock solution you want to take out, right? So we just calculated that it was 325 milliliters. Take out the stock solution, and then you add it to another pipette, or I'm sorry, another flask, and then dilute that to the mark. So you're diluting it to a specific volume, because remember that these volumetric flasks don't tell you any volume other than where that mark is. Okay, and then you have your more dilute solution. Okay, sometimes you have to do this several times in order to get to a really, really dilute solution. Now let's apply our molarity to a stoic problem. So in this situation, we have 250 milliliters of 5 molar HCl, so that's the acid, is reacting with base, calcium hydroxide. We have 310 milliliters of this, and the concentration is 4.5 molar. And here's our reaction. Acid-base reactions always produce water and some sort of salt. In this case, it's calcium chloride. What's the limiting reactant? So we know we're going to have to figure that out. And how many moles of product are produced when the product is evaporated to dryness. So this is obviously happening in water. It's an aqueous solution. And so if we're evaporating to dryness, we're removing all that water until it's constant weight, and then we would know how much product we have. Let's jump to paper again so we can go through this. All right, so I rewrote the equation, and I like to write the numbers that we're given kind of underneath each reactant to kind of keep myself organized and keep track of what I'm doing. So we're trying to figure out how much product we can make. I'm going to do this two different ways to kind of show you, just to show you two different methods. Remember that it's a limiting reactant problem, so we're going to have to calculate how much product this makes and how much product this makes separately. All right, so let's start with the HCl. We have a concentration of 5 molar, which would be 5 moles per liter. If we take our concentration, our 5 moles per liter, and take it times liters, our liters would cancel. In this case, we have 0.25 liters. Now we're left with moles of HCl, and at this point, it's basically turned into just a regular Stoich problem. You have moles of a reactant, we need to figure out how much moles of product we can make. So it's already in moles, so now we can just do the mole ratio. 2 moles of HCl is enough to produce 1 mole of calcium chloride. And this comes out to 0.625. All right, another way you could do it, let's do that with the calcium hydroxide. We could just do our regular molarity equation, which is moles per liter. And in this case, we have 0.31 liters, right? And we need to figure out what our moles are. So same thing as you did here, we were multiplying by your volume to solve for x. So we have 1.395 moles of calcium hydroxide. And you have to pay attention here. This isn't moles of product, right? We're not going to compare these two just yet. We have our moles of our reactant still. We still need to do the Stoich to convert it to moles of calcium chloride. The ratio ends up being 1:1 anyways, though. Now this is a limiting reactants problem, so we have 2 answers, and we're going to take the smaller of the two, because when we run out of HCl after we make 0.625 moles, we don't have enough HCl to make this many moles of calcium chloride. All right, you may see free response questions on some tests, either test in class or the AP exam itself, that describe or have you describe how to make how to carry out a lab, or how to do something like make a dilution or make a solution for something. You need to be specific in what you say in order to receive full credit. You want to show that you know what you're talking about, right? So you want to mention that there's a stock solution. If it's a dilution, then you'd want to say that you're taking a sample from a stock solution with a pipette, preferably. You could use a graduated cylinder, but the pipette is way more precise and accurate. And you're going to place it into a volumetric flask and then dilute that to the volume with water, right? Getting it to where the meniscus is just above that line. Once we're diluting this, once we get close, we tend to add just drops of water, because if you overshoot it, now you've added too much water and you've diluted the solution too much beyond the correct amount. If we're dealing with acid, we're always going to add acid to water. I was always told in college, do the reaction as you oughta, add the acid to the wada. The acid is more dense, it sinks to the bottom. Whenever you pour something into something else, what you're pouring into is what splashes out, if there's any splashing. So we want that to be the water. So there's some examples of questions that you might see involving molarity and dilutions, and applying those skills in other types of questions like stoichiometry questions. All right, this is Mr. Yurgler signing out.